We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin from CBS World News. A press association has just announced that President Roosevelt is dead. The president died of a cerebral hemorrhage. All we know so far is that the president died at Warm Springs in Georgia.
This photograph, which perfectly captures the devastation that the American people went through upon the death of their president, was the first ever photo that Stanley Kubrick sold to a newspaper for money. From this point on, Stanley Kubrick would continue to grow as an artist and make American political commentary through his photos and especially through film. He would go on to become a cinematic legend. Stanley was born on July 26, 1929, and he grew up primarily in the Bronx, New York City. Stanley's father had a passion for photography, so Stanley held access to lots of camera equipment from a very young age. Throughout his school days, he continued to develop his passion for photography. He was very smart. However, he didn't apply himself to school. He was much more interested in his true passion for photography and storytelling. After selling this photograph to Look magazine at only 16 years old, he worked his way up to the magazine's staff photographer. He would then turn his love for photography into a love for film. In 1951, Kubrick directed his first short documentary, Day of the Fight, and he released his first feature-length narrative film, Fear and Desire, in 1953. These films would gather the attention of several movie studios, as well as some small audiences. His films continued to grow upon the popular releases of his films Paths of Glory and Lolita. He was praised for his new and innovative cinematography practices, especially his use of steady tracking shots. This would become a trademark of Kubrick's style. Kubrick was cementing himself as a cutting-edge filmmaker who wasn't afraid to take a stance and stir controversy. His 1962 film, Lolita, was very provocative for the conservative 1950s, and it was met with lots of controversy. Catholic churches actively told people to not see the film, but Kubrick stayed true to his vision and continued to make the films that he wanted to make, regardless of what others thought. His confident vision and high-quality films made him a director that people were beginning to pay attention to. In 1964, Kubrick released his most political film yet, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. This satirical film centers around American and Soviet politics, and it critiques the absurdity of nuclear bombs and all of their destructive power. It uses satire and ridiculous comedy to demonstrate just how flawed and often stupid humans are, and how no human should ever hold the power of an atomic weapon. The movie is genuinely quite funny, and it brought in a large audience, was nominated for 4 Academy Awards including Best Picture, and it is still commonly placed on several lists for some of the best movies ever made. Through its entertaining comedy, the film was able to reach a wide audience of people who may have never thought about nuclear weapons in this way. It's a truly special example of the power of satire. In addition to the comedy, the film's cinematography and special effects impressed critics and cinema fans. Kubrick lights each shot beautifully and frames each shot with great purpose. This scene of the president on the phone with the Soviet leader could have easily become a close-up shot, yet Kubrick decides to maintain a wide shot for the entire scene. This wider perspective includes a large crowd of government officials patiently watching the president's awkward conversation, and this choice of framing brings up this scene to one of the funniest parts of the movie. The film ultimately ends in a hilarious yet terrifying catastrophe that has become one of the most iconic movie endings of all time. The film truly highlighted just how close the possibility of nuclear devastation actually was. Following the successes of his previous works, for Kubrick's next film, he was now graced with not only a much higher budget, but complete creative freedom to go along with it. Given this rare opportunity, he ended up creating one of the most important and monumental landmarks in all of cinema. He created the masterpiece 2001: A Space Odyssey. This movie is a benchmark in filmmaking, and it would go on to define a new era in science fiction films, inspiring films like Star Wars, Interstellar, Blade Runner, Alien, Solaris, The Terminator, and so many more. This film was shot on beautiful 70mm film, and it used gorgeous practical effects. It's almost impossible to believe that this film was created before man had even landed on the moon. It immerses the viewer with its commitment to its slow pace, which fully captures how space can feel both so empty yet so vast. On the surface, the film is a story about the advancement of the human race through space exploration. However, throughout the expedition, the ship's artificial intelligence system, HAL 9000, takes over the trip and tries to prevent humans from succeeding. Ultimately, it isn't until the end that the humans outsmart HAL and completely shut him down. After this point, the film completely switches to a far more visually and sonically abstract style, and this ending confused many audience members. The most commonly agreed ending explanation is that after destroying artificial intelligence and resisting its convenience, humans have passed almost a test of some sort, and have advanced to the next point of evolution. This film was extremely ahead of its time with its story, and it redefined the rulebook. The film is still a part of the discussion today, and it is still referenced and parodied all over pop culture. This film truly cemented Kubrick's deserved spot in film history. Following the release of 2001: A Space Odyssey, Kubrick entered the new Hollywood era of the 1970s. In this new era, characterized by looser content restrictions involving violence, profanity, and sex, as well as greater creative control given to the director, Kubrick entered the New Hollywood era with his cult classic, Psychedelic Nightmare: A Clockwork Orange. This film was met with both praise and controversy. The film is highly disturbing because it includes graphic scenes of physical and psychological torture, including a scene of the main character breaking into a woman's home, forcefully removing her clothing, and then raping her and beating her until she dies. Many found the film completely appalling, and it was frequently banned. The film, however, would find an audience through its shock, intelligent insights into human psychology, and unique cinematography. However, Kubrick's next film would struggle at the box office. Barry Lyndon was a 1750s Irish period piece that was over 3 hours long, and while it was adored by critics, it came across as inaccessible to mass audiences. It failed to make the same profits as films like 2001: A Space Odyssey or A Clockwork Orange, and to keep studios happy, Kubrick needed his next film to be a commercial success.
Red rum. 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 Stop it. Red rum. Red rum. Red rum.
Kubrick chose to adapt the popular Stephen King novel, The Shining, into a feature film, and it would go on to become one of the most memorable, quoted, and iconic films ever released.
Here's Johnny. Here's Johnny. Don't.
The Shining's cultural impact cannot be understated. It has been referenced several times in movies, cartoons, and music. Even right now, in the year 2024, we can see the hit 21 Savage song, Red Rum, an homage to The Shining, topping global charts. This film left an undeniable mark on film and pop culture history, and despite being Kubrick's first real horror film, it is frequently regarded as one of the best horror films of all time.
Well, everybody's heard about the bird.
Kubrick's next film would once again take a stance on U.S. foreign policy and the brutality of war. In 1987, Kubrick released Full Metal Jacket, his brutal Vietnam feature film. The film aimed to capture a realistic depiction of the Vietnam experience, from boot camp to combat. By this point in his career, Kubrick was already a legend who understood how to create a fantastic film. The basic training scenes feature R. Lee Ermey as the drill sergeant, and he actually served as a drill sergeant from 1965 to 1967. The film follows an unconventional story structure with 3 very distinct acts: basic training, deployment and combat, and the sniper sequence. Each is fantastic and memorable in its own way, and they all work to piece together an engaging Vietnam War story. The film is shot with beautiful framing, lighting, and cinematography. It uses music to effectively create irony and juxtaposition by often picking very unserious songs to accompany very serious footage, such as Surf and Bird by the Trashmen, accompanying shots of mass death and destruction. The music really brings out the destruction on screen. The scene of the soldiers marching through fire, holding their guns, and singing the Mickey Mouse song is a fantastic way of highlighting the innocence and humanity of these soldiers, and it uses juxtaposition and irony to a great effect. Full Metal Jacket has withstood the test of time and has become a critical and commercial success. Many associate the film with the Vietnam War itself, and many of the images from the film are difficult to separate from the actual war. By this point, after 36 years in the industry and 12 films to his name, Kubrick had solidified himself as a legend that other filmmakers should be looking up to. After a long hiatus, Kubrick released his final film in 1999, Eyes Wide Shut. The film followed what had become the Kubrick tradition at this point. It was immediately met with controversy, critical acclaim, and popularity among audiences. On March 7, 1999, just 1 week after the film's release, Kubrick had passed away from a heart attack. He left the world after having made one of the most important impacts on cinema and American pop culture and politics. Stanley Kubrick will forever be remembered as one of the greatest directors and one of the greatest artists of all time.